Do you have a great admiration for people who don't even exist? Do you know histories of fake worlds better than you know your own? Do you geek out? If so, geek out with us. Here, now. It's the Geek for All show.
All right, hey, yeah, it is the Geek for All, and I am your host, Geekmeister. Joining me is Winchester.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, sorry, we have been gone for a really long time. I know, I'm sorry. If it helps, there's a funeral involved. So we are not going to. We're recording this at the extreme tail end of September, where it'll be released in October. So, perfect timing, though, because today we're talking about it, and we're talking about Stranger Things.
Yay!
So yeah, let's start with Stranger Things. So Stranger Things is the older one. So that came out a while ago, but we got the second season coming up, and we haven't had a chance to ever really talk about it. We've talked about it briefly on a couple of the Netflix episodes, but Winchester hadn't actually caught up with the show yet.
Yep.
Finally, she's caught up, so we're gonna go ahead and talk about it. So you're fresher to it. What was your interpretation of like just first impression?
The fact that it was such a love letter to the 1980s horror, Stephen King horror, it was perfect. Like, the kids as a team fighting and like the adults not believing them and like becoming this team, you know, having these weapons like slingshots and, you know, things like that. It was, I think as a genre television show like that, I think it was, you just got the mood, the 80s mood, the like, just the kids they didn't have cell phones, they were working on, you know, first edition D&D, like it's just this feeling. The environment was perfect.
I mean, yeah, no, definitely a love letter to the 80s horror films for sure. It not only captured like the essence of like sort of the 80s really, really well, but specifically the rhythm, like not only in themes of like, yeah, the parents are not believing, but like rhythmatically, like the way that it was, but it was done over like the course of like a, you know, entire season of television, basically. Yeah. So they were able to draw out a lot of those beats, which was fantastic. You know, instead of like a scene being dedicated to the like, oh, is she maybe going to go sleep with the wrong guy thing, there was a whole episode that got to be about the, you know what I mean? Like these tiny moments wound up becoming much bigger throughout the show, which was really cool. So it just felt like watching a really, really long horror film.
It did, and it played well. Like, I would never say that there were moments where it was scary. I would never say it's super...
It's more suspenseful than scary.
It's definitely more suspenseful.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily freak you out, per se, but
No.
it definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat and like, what's gonna happen next?
Yeah, and just like there's certain scenes, like in the beginning when Will gets chased, or even when... now I'm blanking on her name. When the sister ends up in the Upside Down. And where the tree bark closes. That scene is perfect. The music and it just closing and then it goes to dark is just Nancy. When Nancy does it, it's just perfect. It's so good.
Yeah. No, the Upside Down in general is handled really well. Like I like the way that the portals to it look. Because a lot of times like when you have like the sci-fi genre, you kind of get these portals that it's made out of like this quantum energy of swirling madness, and like this was way more organic. It was very organic. it like thinking about like hopping dimensions like via something that's slimy and tactile in general is very creepy, because there isn't like such a clean barrier as there is with the swirling energy and everything.
And it feels like it's something that, even though it hasn't been there forever, it's more recent, it feels like it's been there forever.
Right.
It gives a very post-apocalyptic kind of vibe to it when you're in the Upside Down, and that portal, it feels like it's this secret that the city, that the town's been holding, even though it's not. It's more recent, but it feels like it's been there forever.
Yeah, no, for sure. They did a great job with just making the Upside Down do that. It perfectly mimicked and was different from the real world.
Oh, yeah.
And not just in like the color scheme, because that was the very obvious, like, oh, you're clearly in the Upside Down. But there were things were all in their relative place and everything as far as objects and buildings and stuff like that, but the decay on it all and everything, and the fact that it wasn't like, just a singular wash of decay, like some parts were more decrepit than others for whatever reason. It was sort of, it felt like a place that was a little bit in flux, that was, inconsistent because it was based on something else, and the environment was just really, really well done in general. And then you've got 5 child actors.
Phenomenal.
Holy shit.
So good. So this generation's child actors, we've talked about this before when we talked about the girl who played X-23 in Logan. And we've talked about the girl who plays 11 a little bit too in that same episode, because we want them to team up, because holy shit.
Gosh.
Like, they're so good.
Fuck yeah.
So like this generation's child actor, I am blown away at this genre. Like, these kids, every so often, I'll talk about it later in it, but like in Stranger Things, I don't know if it's because they had more time to work on it or what, but all the kids were phenomenal. And the fact that they're kids, and they embodied kids in school. They worried about bullies, they worried about other things other than this supernatural monster. But the fact that there was no like hokiness, there was no like, oh, we're trying to get them to act and they're not really doing that, they're just kind of like saying the lines. There was that feeling that this was the most important thing to them. Right, no, they
as actors really got themselves invested in those roles, and they at least in their own way, however they did it, they connected with the characters that they were playing. Certainly, like you could see it in the energy that they were presenting. Really, really on point. Like, solid actors. The environment was phenomenal, and especially considering that the actors, like we said, are kids, and a lot of times you are expecting that hokiness, not there. Mm-hmm. And then you just gotta give it back to where it all started, that somebody wrote a really phenomenal story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just this story that you could have easily picked up a Stephen King novel, and this story would have been it. Mm-hmm. Like, it throws back to a couple of, it throws back to Stephen King's It, obviously, and the ties to that. But it could have very easily been a 1980s horror novel. Like, just the small town ravaged by something that they don't understand, and the kids being the ones to notice, and being this nightmare that's hunting people. It's very classic feeling, but not classic like you're watching a 1980s horror movie and it's not scary, it's super funny because it's just awful. It's very classic in this is how I felt when I was watching these movies when I was a kid kind of feeling. Yeah, no, it reconnects you to sort of that childhood sensibility and innocence. Because when our parents watched some of those movies, they weren't as scared as we were, because they had impressions of the world that we didn't, right. And things, you just, when you're a kid, you're more easily freaked out. That's just the easiest way to say it. So this has kind of that same feel, but has upped the ante a little bit. Definitely. As well as It, and we'll get to that in a minute again. But in any case, most people know like the plot. We're not gonna like go like super into it. We're just like making our basic commentaries on it. But as far as speculation for season 2 goes, like there's so little information, but at the same time they've released certain things that like there's so much speculation on what's gonna happen that it feels like it's gonna be bigger. And it feels so good. Well, I mean, clearly, because there's allusions to the fact that, or they have alluded to the fact, I should say, that the Demogorgon is back again, but has somehow gained more power. Like, we see, like, an image of it sort of in that, like, red... In the cloud sky thing, so... something bigger is coming. Yeah, but it's still somehow connected to that original threat and everything. Right. But I think what I'm most curious about, more than anything else, is the fact that the sheriff
was still somehow getting Eggo waffles to
Yes.
11 at the end. Like, it was such a small detail, and the fact that it was Eggo waffles specifically, made it really cute. But that is a serious, like, well, but what happened there?
It's
like,
a very...
how is he doing that? Who are those people who came and talked to him?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously they're from the lab and everything, but who owned that lab? We still don't totally understand who was doing this research. We don't, like a scientist from, like, a shady end of the government. We don't know still, like, what that was all about exactly. And more to the point, we don't know how they knew about everything that they did. We don't know what he was told by them at the end.
Yep.
And we don't know how he's,
we don't know really anything. We don't know how he's connected to, like, last we saw of 11, she vanished. So, like, we don't know how he's we don't know anything. But that cliffhanger just makes it, because otherwise everything pretty much wraps up nicely. Like, Will's family has a nice Christmas dinner, but then there's that little bit of a hook at the end there. There's a little bit, then that hook with...
Yeah, that hook is very interesting.
It tells you, it's just like, oh yeah, everything's gonna wrap up nicely. Here's everyone recovering. Oh wait, never mind.
Yeah, it was beautiful in that way, and yeah, they're just like, yeah, it looks like it's, like you said, like, it looks like everything wraps up nicely, and then not, and then, like, what that specifically, because there's, the mystery of, like, okay, he's clearly still connecting to 11 and getting her Eggos, and then there's, like, this, like, well, something slithered out of that kid's mouth.
Yeah.
And, like, so, it's, like, you could speculate endlessly about, like, what it's all gonna be, like, are there going... did the Demigorgon kind of successfully, like, reproduce, and that was its, like, spawn going, and that's what we're actually seeing, is that there's now one of those creatures that's sort of based in this reality and can manipulate this reality more effectively, because clearly it had at least some tangent of control over the Upside Down.
Exactly.
So is it going to have that kind of tangent of control in our own reality? Hard to say, but, like, it certainly could, especially if the final spawning was here and it was gestated in something that was from our reality in the first place.
Right.
It's just, there's so many things that could potentially be happening right here, and we're ultimately, like, not gonna know, but I wonder. I'm constantly curious how intelligent the Demigorgon is.
Because it seems like very much a hunter, just kind of, I'm hungry, I'm hunting, this is it, kind of, like a very intelligent hunter in terms of instinct and trapping its prey and catching its prey. But to be fair, every time it does, it's a sneak attack up until the final ending.
Right. No, you never really get a good look at it until the very
No.
end, which is a good thing, because it was ultimately kind of like, all right, here's your generic CGI monster when everything came down to it.
Right.
Which still works for the 80s thing, actually, quite nicely.
It does.
Because it, was ultimately just going to be a dude in a rubber suit.
Yeah.
And so it was about building up to the dude in the rubber suit, so you're still scared of the dude in the rubber suit.
Exactly.
Which they did a great job, because I wouldn't say I was necessarily scared, but it was still just definitely like, I was invested enough where I was like, okay, if that thing was actually standing in front of me, I can put myself in those shoes and...
Well, because now you've gone through 6 or 8 episodes where you care about these 11-year-olds, these kids who are facing this monster. So it's not necessarily your fear of the monster, it's your fear of these characters you've grown to like being hurt by the monster.
Don't hurt them. Don't do it.
Exactly. So
don't
like,
do it.
even with Will, where Will's communicating with his mom, which is such... I love that. So I was watching it, and I had watched like a couple things, and I'd seen like the iconic Christmas lights as like this, kind of taking the internet kind of thing, and I didn't realize it's important, but it's not. It's so smallishly important.
Right, no, it's literally, that happens in a single episode.
Exactly.
But it's such an amazing, like, it says so much about how much you can affect our reality from the Upside Down. Mm-hmm. It says, everything about how clever that kid and his mom, like, that whole family is super clever.
Yeah.
And, it just illustrates what things you can accomplish if you really put your mind to it, even if it doesn't see, because the goal was, let's communicate.
Right.
And it was about one of the damn oddest forms of communication you could imagine, but like the tenacity ultimately brought you to be able to get something, even if it seemed kind of like, how is this going to work for us? But
and it kind of brought this feeling of a Ouija board without having a Ouija board.
This is true.
It was a larger scale Ouija board.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right.
Continues to bring that 80s horror feel, because that's when we were kids, like, the Ouija board was a thing before it was, like, mass marketed by Hasbro or whoever mass markets it now. It was this cult phenomenon kind of thing that, did you move the thing? Did you move the thing?
Right, no.
You know, this other world is communicating with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And this show is all very cyclical. It all starts with a story that could have been a Stephen King story.
Yep.
And it then goes into somebody saw that story, recognized that in it, or that was the original intent of writing the story. Can't say for sure one way or the other, but clearly the mission statement became and always was to give it that Stephen King's 80s movie quality to it.
Yep.
And that never, every decision that was made about it was made with that in mind, and everything feeds into that, and it feeds into everything else. Though the story helps drive that feeling, and that feeling then in turn helps drive the story further. And it's really just an incredible piece of cinema.
Absolutely.
It was well done. I remember when I first it was just like a random thing that popped up in the suggestions. Nobody had been really watching it yet at that point, and I could not put it down. Like I watched, I think, 6 of the episodes in one sitting. Had to like get up after that point. I think I would have watched more, but I think I had to go to work at that point. Is what it ultimately was, and then I finished it off. But yeah, I nearly did that whole thing in one sitting. And because I couldn't stop, it was utterly compelling to find out what was happening next in this bizarre but wonderful story.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we got a lot of things to look forward to with that in season 2, and once we actually get to season 2, we'll do an episode about that and everything. But the main event for today is, of course, It, because that's back out in theater. There's a new movie that first of all, I love the fact that because there's going to be 2 of these things, despite the fact that the miniseries was like 6 hours long.
Yeah, it was like 6 hours.
They're still getting more detail on this than they were on that. Like you think this is the condensed version, it's really not.
It's
this is a
not.
very expanded version. Because there were so many slow moments in that first one to try to build suspense. There were so many slow moments in the miniseries in an attempt to kind of like keep you plugging along, but I don't know. There were parts. I remember there were parts that were actually boring of that original miniseries.
It's very shallow. I want to say it's shallow. It's very much a let's tell the story about the kid. Let's tell the story about present day as we're saying it. So the first half is present day for them right that moment in the 50s or the 60s. And that's it. There's no history about the town. The fact that this town is it's a thing. That these kids go disappearing. Like, the new movie establishes that way early, that Derry is very much a town where the adults are in this just apathetic haze, and these kids go missing every 27 or so years.
You might as well be back in Sunnydale.
Right, exactly. It's Sunnydale.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. With a slightly slower cycle of people dying.
Right.
But that's exactly what it is. It's very much Sunnydale. And the miniseries barely touches on it. It's very much we're gonna do the story as of right now, but not really give a whole lot of. We get the brief history when Mike gives a history about it, just like in the new movie.
Right.
But that's just as a backstory for this creature.
Well, no, that's the whole thing. In the miniseries, it's really about them as adults, and everything from the time in the 60s.
Right.
That's just a flashback.
Yeah.
Like that's just backstory to what's happening right now.
Exactly.
And I really like that they took the approach like, no, actually, the adult version part of it is supposed to be the follow-up to the story, kind of. Like really the big. I'm not sure how Stephen King wrote it. He may have written it all together I'm not sure what his writing process was, but I would totally believe that he maybe started with just the story of the kids and then figured out like, well, what if it did come back though, and then continued writing his book that way. Although I know it does go back and forth in the book itself. But still, like if you told me that, I wouldn't be surprised, because the story of the kids stands so well on its own.
It does.
And with the adult story, you need all of that context. So again, like the fact that they centered it this way, like no, the the main story is that chapter 1. The chapter 2 is the follow-up to everything.
Yep.
It's the second part of the arc, you know? It's not the foundational, it's the conclusion of everything. And this whole movie was foundational for what was trying to be built, and you didn't get a lot of that in the first one. So just from a writing standpoint, I certainly like it more. I know Stephen King liked this version more. He didn't even really like the original miniseries all that much. I mean, he wasn't as mad at it as The Shining, because at least they told his actual story in the...
Right. And for somebody who's very vocal about his adaptations, and is very forgiving about his adaptations, because there's a lot of... he's got one story that he doesn't... Okay, so he's got a thing, I don't know if he still does it, but if you're a beginning filmmaker, he'll give you the rights to certain things for free. As long as you're not making money on it, and you just want to get started as a filmmaker, he'll let you do it. I don't know if he still does it, but that's how he used to do it back in the day. And as long as you weren't making money on it, you were just doing it to get your feet wet and to kind of build your resume, so to speak, build your reel, he would just let you do it. Now, once you started making money, you had to then pay royalties, but then he would put those royalties, I think he put them in like a charity or something. So the fact that he's pretty forgiving about adaptations, and he's very vocal about adaptations. So when he says something's good, I tend to believe him.
Right, no, and that's not only did he endorse this movie just like in the public, he assisted them creating a video like right before you watch the film. There's a little blurb of like, "Hi, I'm Stephen King, and I actually approve of this film."
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and I completely understand why. I think their attention to that original story is much more pronounced in this film.
Definitely.
And
for the 1,000-page book that it is.
Yeah, and the directing is spectacular also in this movie. And for the most part, the acting is a lot better too.
Yes.
Now, I will say, and we'll get back to this, I think I still like Tim Curry's Pennywise a little bit more, or at least I enjoy his performance of it a little bit more. But I think that's the one thing about the original that I like more than this film. This film was really something special, and definitely got back to what a horror film should be about. Because a horror film, you've got your jump scares. Sure, absolutely. That's kind of been around since the beginning. But jump scares used to be done a little bit differently. You used to have more of a build-up to them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it wouldn't just be the jump and then that was it. It would be a jump and a follow-through type of thing. Mm-hmm. The slow fading light up on Michael Myers in the first Halloween,
yes.
where she's in the closet and his face slowly illuminates, because it's still kind of a jump scare, because like you don't notice it until you notice it, so it's differently timed for everybody based on when they're noticing it. So it's still a jump scare, but it's still a jump scare with a build and then like a follow through on it.
Exactly.
And this movie was full of that. Anytime that you had like a kind of like sudden change of environment or anything like that, it still was followed up by like, no, we're not just gonna like do that and then cut away from it. We're gonna do that and then keep showing the horror that is about to be happening.
Oh yeah, well, okay, so let's talk about that in the first scene. The first scene is it's iconic because it's almost shot for shot of the 1990s.
Absolutely.
Like between the book and the 1990s, we're gonna say miniseries, just for simplicity's sake. It's almost shot for shot. You have Bill, who's sick, in bed, making a boat for his kid brother Georgie, and Georgie wants to go out and play in the rain, and he makes it for his brother. Georgie has to go down in the basement, which. You're a liar if you say you, as a kid, or even now, you're not scared of a basement.
Oh, God, come on.
Like, especially that basement, super creepy.
Yeah, definitely.
Super creepy. So, the fact that, like, right off the bat, and the whole movie does this, where it's very much things that you were scared of as a kid. And, like, clowns, everyone says, oh my God, clowns freak me out, blah, blah, blah. But as a kid, clowns did freak you out. The basement freaked you out. Things in sewers where you couldn't really see things freaked you out. Certain things were scary. And so they start off with Georgie taking the boat, and they do it in the trailer. And it's mostly that's what the trailer is, but he's chasing the boat down the flooded street, and you get a laugh because he knocks himself out on the sawhorse. And that's part of it is that this movie was funny, and they lull you into this false sense of security with the hilarious bit of the kid knocking himself out, or somebody swearing or making a joke. They lull you into this false sense of security. So, and we all know what's going to happen to Georgie. Like, pop culture wise, you know what's going to happen to the poor kid. He finds Pennywise. They have a conversation, which is the first time you hear Pennywise speak, and holy shit.
So weird. It was such
It's so good. Like, it's so creepy, but it's not. And we'll get into it, like, comparatively.
We'll save the Pennywise comparison after we've gotten through everything else, because it's a hard comparison to make, and there's a lot of differences, but then things that can be compared. So we'll get to that. But anyway, but we were on the jump scare. I know what you're talking about. So the reaching for the boat.
The reaching for the boat, and you know what's gonna happen. So everyone's like, George, you don't do it. You know he's gonna do it, but you're like, come on, no, and you're hoping that it's not gonna happen, even though you know it's gonna happen. He reaches for the boat. He gets grabbed, and in the miniseries, all you see is Pennywise's mouth and the fangs, and then it kind of, the camera goes into his mouth and it turns dark, and that's it. And then the title sequence happens. Not so much with this one.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a bit more graphic than all that.
He rips the poor kid's arm off, and then you watch the poor kid crawl in the street in the rain away from this thing, screaming for an adult.
As Pennywise's elongated arm comes out and and with the jump scare is the grabbing.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, you saw the build up. Like, he reaches for it a couple times, pulls back. Nah, kid, you gotta get closer. You gotta get closer. And then the jump scare of he actually lashes onto him with the hand, which is like the actual jump scare. And then the follow through, which might even be more terrifying, are the jaws, because in this they are really well done.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially with Flute Lady. Oh my god, Flute Lady and okay. So another really incredibly well executed jump scare is what's the name of
Stan.
Stan. Okay.
So it's the first time Stan interacts with it.
Yeah, the first time Stan interacts is there is this painting that is horrifying to him, and I completely agree.
Yeah, who keeps a painting like that around? It's creepy as fuck.
I mean, I keep creepy stuff around, I guess, but like, I don't know. That seems a little extra creepy.
You could probably think, seeing from Stan's point of view, like seeing from a kid's point of view, a lot of things are scary that when they see him as adults, they're like, I don't know why I was scared of that.
Yeah.
So we see it from Stan's point of view. Theoretically, that painting could not be that creepy.
True.
Just from his point of view.
That's a good point, because immediately we were set up because we see him like trying to not. He's covering his eyes, like that thing you would actually do when you were a kid.
Yeah.
If there was a weird ornament or something in your house that you just didn't like or whatever, or like there was like a hallway that you had to walk past and it was dark and you kind of felt like maybe something was watching you from it. You'd cover one side of your face and do like the horse blinder thing.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we did with this face. So immediately you're kind of put off guard because he's put off guard to it. And no, for sure. But what winds up happening is there's this great kind of build up where he adjusts the painting and he hears a noise and he looks back at the painting and this lady who's playing a flute in this painting is not in the painting, and then he hears flute from behind him.
Yep.
And then he turns around slowly and the flute is still going and it's dark, and then you hear the flute kind of stop and like fall to the ground as if like somebody was dropping a flute. And this lady's face is both like kind of crooked and warped and elongated.
It's kind of like
a Salvador Dali.
Kind of like a Salvador Dali or like the Scream painting.
Yes. Is that Dali?
No, it's I don't remember who it is.
Okay, it's not.
But it's not Dali.
Yeah.
But the Scream painting, that's kind of what she looks like, but she doesn't have a face.
Right.
No, she doesn't have eyes.
Well, she's got the two.
Did she have the two dots?
Yeah, she's got two.
She did.
She has
but it was
two
very
yellow
melted.
dots, but everything else is just this gray wash of.
Yes.
And
melt.
And that image like comes out from the dark, but there was this whole build up before you get to that, and she doesn't just come out and he like runs away. She come out and you get a good like 5.5 second look at this thing coming at, just like, and oh man, no, it was.
And even so, for all of the kids, except for Bill, we don't get it as much because we know that his fear is the reason it latches onto Georgie for Bill, and for for Richie, we don't get a whole lot of his fear because in the original and in the book, it's a werewolf. Well, they didn't want to do that, so they kind of play his off a little bit more. But for all the other kids that we get something visual, like majorly visual, it's and you and I kind of talked about this, but it's all shot from above. So the thing that's hunting them is much taller than they are.
Yeah.
Whether it's the leper for Eddie, it's the headless burned corpse for Ben, which fuck that shit. Holy fuck. That thing shambling around and just bolting through the stacks and chasing him. Fuck that noise.
I'm sorry. I have to stop you really quick because that one, the thing like homages to other. How much did that scene feel like the opening to the first Ghostbusters movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, and if you watch, when you watch Ben as he kind of hears what's going, he watches the balloon float behind him. Look at the librarian that talked to him. She has a creepy smile on her face.
Well, I need to go back and watch that.
You can. I'm pretty sure it's like a split second, but you basically see Pennywise. Like you see that creepy smile on her face, and like he's taken over her almost. But even things like with Bev in the bathroom when the sink explodes with blood, it's not like there's no physical thing. There's no clown. There's nothing. But then she's in the corner and her father comes in. And there's that dichotomy of her on the floor and her father towering above her. Like, the kids all have something that scares them, and everything makes them feel smaller. And just each fear was... I had those moments of, like, it was that stereotypical in a horror movie, don't go in there, don't go in there, don't go in there, because of the lead up to all of it. Whether it was Bev sticking the tape measure down the drain to clear it. Whether it was Eddie going up to the old house, whether it was Stan fixing the painting, or Ben going downstairs and following the balloon, or the eggs, or whatever it was, there was always that lead up of that classic, don't go in there horror.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. And which I thought it was just, we have so many jump scares. Like, horror movies nowadays, it's a lot of jump scares. It's a lot of something stalking you.
I mean, actually, I was thinking about this because as I saw a trailer for another one coming out, because we saw there's another fucking Saw movie being made.
Yes,
but I actually thought about it in the context of all of this later, and I did realize, I think one of the reasons that those movies are successful is that they don't rely on jump scares, and it actually is about the suspense in those films. Like
that one definitely.
They are gore porn, for sure.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, they actually do suspense the way a horror movie is supposed to do suspense. I think that might be why they wind up still being popular, because in a world where literally all other horror movies are completely dependent on their jump scares.
Oh, yeah.
And on pretty poorly executed jump scares in most times, like, why would you not just turn to something like that if the suspense is there that you're actually craving?
Well, and a lot of horror movies lately, and if you go see it, you're gonna get a whole bunch of previews for upcoming horror movies, some of which look okay, some of which don't.
I actually kind of am interested in the Death Day thing, the Groundhog's Day, but it's a horror
that
movie.
One actually looks
that actually looks kind of interesting. I could get down on that.
But then they've got like a Facebook one where this girl's a super stalker and whatever.
Oh god, yeah.
And then that Jennifer Lawrence one that came out, Mother, that's got mixed reviews, and I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah.
But there's so many times where a lot of the modern day horror movies rely on a visual human antagonist. It's some crazy murderer in the house. It's people that are participating in the purge. It's some psycho stalking ex-girlfriend. Something like that. But in terms of the Saw movies, you don't have a whole lot of it's these people stuck in a room together. You're focused on the victims more than you are the killer, and he's not chasing you. You're stuck and you have to play by his rules. And that's kind of a lot of what it is that these kids are stuck in this town, and they have to play by its rules.
Well, more importantly, at least stuck in the it's entire. I'm trying to remember though. Even as adults, though, I think across the country, it was sort of able to reach out to them. So it's the thing, they're literally trapped under the fact that there is something psychokinetic that. Well, not psychokinetic, because it can't actually move things with the mind, but it can create illusions from a great distance. The only time it actually is ever in danger of harming them is when they are around a source of water, when it actually can come out from the sores and everything. Every other time, that's why when it comes out of the projector, it never actually grabs any of them. It could never actually do it. It was all an illusion.
Very much so, but it can still control it.
Right, but that's the thing. It can control it, and so they're trapped in a nightmare created by this thing, and they can leave, go as far as they want. They're still trapped there.
Exactly. And even when, so the thing is that, so when they leave Derry, their memories kind of fade until it shows up again. And which makes sense because it is theoretically dead, so the hold on them kind of dies.
And more importantly, why would you not try to block that out?
Right, exactly. And everybody leaves except Mike. And then it comes back and their memories start coming back. And then they return to Derry and it starts really coming back. But we kind of talk about, so we talk about the fears and we talk about the scare, just the fact that it's just a good horror movie. I'm not big into going to see horror movies in theaters because I like suspense and I don't mind the suspense. I don't mind the gore so much. Certain things, man, this one takes all of the things I hate. Like contortionism, the dolls, kind of creepy children. It ticked all of my boxes.
We all float down here.
Yeah,
we all float down here. We all float down here. We all float down here.
That kid. Okay, so now that I'm saying that kid was phenomenal.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
And really, just like the Stranger Things cast, which we share a cast member in Finn Wolfhard.
Wait, you. Mwah.
I was a little worried because, okay, so Finn plays Richie, who is the class clown, originally originated by Seth Green in the miniseries. And
God, I forgot that was Seth Green.
But the thing is, so the difference between the two characters, because he's one who's very much a character type role. There's a very distinct personality. Seth Green played it very much the class clown. Finn played it as much as the person, that kid who doesn't shut the fuck up.
And is so determined to prove that he's not the little wuss that he is.
That he is. And but when they announced it, he plays oh my god, I'm blanking on his name in Stranger Things. But he plays the main kid in Stranger Things, and which is very much a Bill type role. Yeah. So at first when I heard about it, I was like, I didn't want to typecast the poor kid. He's 12, but I was like, really? I can't see him being Richie. And no, he fucking pulled it off.
Beautiful.
And apparently wouldn't stop saying the word fuck on the Stranger Things season 2 set. Because that's just how he was on it.
Right, no, I mean, after about 4 months of shooting where you're saying fuck every 2 lines.
All the time. I don't think I've heard a kid say that so much.
It was so good. There was something extremely satisfying.
It was. It very much was. I think it made my ears ring once or twice before I got used to it. But it's very, the Losers Club is very genuine. Now I have some things I didn't like about the characters that some of the choices they made. Just because, and it's not an actor thing. I think it's a storyline thing that they switched who the historian was, because it's originally supposed to be Mike, and they turned it into Ben, which it makes sense. The way they changed it, makes sense.
I like that they gave Ben some reason to actually be there,
right,
other than pity from the group.
Exactly, and the fact that he's an outsider, he's new to town, so it would make sense, and so is Mike. Mike's an outsider. But the fact that either one of them could easily interchangeably be the historian and be like, wait a second, that's not normal. Mm-hmm. Guys, this is not a thing that you should just, not care about. It's important. Stan kind of fell to the wayside a little bit, but he does that in the original too. Which is fine because he's not long for this world. Which we'll get to in a second too. But the girl who played Bev, phenomenal.
So good.
Phenomenal. Just the Losers Club in general. There was very much that feeling that
the Molly Ringwald line was hilarious.
It was perfect because she does look like Molly Ringwald.
She does look like Molly Ringwald. It's insane.
And if Molly Ringwald wasn't 50, she would be perfect for an older Bev.
Right.
If this was 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, no.
She would have been perfect older Bev. Yep. Because she does look like Molly Ringwald. And because I thought about that before they said the line, I was like, wow, she really looks like her. Damn. And then they said it, and it's very, very true. But the fact that these kids, just like with the Stranger Things cast, you can tell that they got along very well. They played off each other. They acted like kids in summer.
Yes.
The swearing, the making fun of each other, the ragging on them, on each other.
The mom jokes were phenomenal.
Oh my god, the mom jokes were so good. So good. Just it brought that humor to the show. The miniseries didn't really have it. It brought here's what it was. The kids didn't bring the humor to the miniseries. Tim Curry did.
Yes, he did.
And I think that's the big difference between the Pennywises, which we can get into.
We'll get into that. Yeah, but that is my big thing. Is that and I think you're right. The fun was just simply it has been transferred now, and the kids are the ones kind of with the fun.
Exactly. They're not complete. They're not just terrorized. There's very much this. We're living with this thing, but we still have to deal with our regular lives.
Life is still there. It's still happening. And yeah, for the ones who don't have a little brother who might, still just be lost somewhere,
exactly.
Totally not. But for them, it's like, they do just want to be kids and go have a summer. Like, they understand, like, the importance and everything, but at the same time, it's like, why us? Why do we have to be the ones who do this and figure this all out and everything?
Exactly. Well, and everybody, so Bill's got dealing with Georgie and the neglectful parents. I don't think the parents necessarily are neglectful in the way that, like, Bev's father is, or even...
that's not neglect, that's straight abuse in that case.
Or even, I'm blanking on his name, but the main bully and his father, the cop.
That's also kind of straight abuse,
That's
too.
straight abuse, but they're more, but Bill's parents are very much more you see it a lot with parents who have lost a child. Is that there's a depression and there's a separation.
I mean, I think there was a bit of a clue that was something that was already there, though. Because the way his mom is sort of just mindlessly kind of going about her piano at the beginning.
And just lets Georgie leave.
Doesn't care what's going on with him or anything like that. And the dad, even when the dad is about to, like, scold him for, like, oh, well, I told you not to set this stuff up. What is he doing instead of doing, like, the arms folded, waiting for him to come in? He's working on a leg for a chair or a table or some shit like that. Like, clearly Bill's parents don't give a fuck. Like,
and you could probably chalk that up to whatever the spell that it has put on Derry. As them being affected, but that might not also be the entire reason.
But I think some of his parents are just neglectful.
Exactly, and I think it's amplified with it being
Sure. No, that totally would make sense.
But then all the other kids, you've got Eddie and his super overprotective mother, who has, I'm positive, some sort of we know the hypochondria, but also the I'm blanking on the actual, like, phobia, but the fear of being outside.
Oh, agoraphobia?
Yeah, you can tell she's agoraphobic.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a huge thing in the book, too, and it's way more drastic in the book. But her agoraphobia and just trying to keep him safe, so he's got to deal with that, and his own kind of phobias that she's instilled in him.
Right, no,
because his biggest fear is disease. So he's got to deal with that. Stan's got to deal with his father and trying to become a man and quote unquote deal with that, which is a very interesting kind of everyday life kind of slice of life kind of problem.
Well, that's the thing. All of them are. All of the kids' individual problems before it showed. That's what's great about it. That's what makes the Losers Club kind of like this special thing, is that all of these kids have some, like, legit real world problems that this monster then feeds on. That's why they get targeted in the first place, because those things were already there and already existed for them.
Exactly. I think the only one they don't really talk about is Ben's. And in the miniseries they talk about it, in the book they talk about it. Ben lost his father. So his father dies in a war. I think because they don't they don't talk about it because in this miniseries and in the book it's like the Korean War or the Vietnam War.
Right, we didn't really have, like, a good war.
We didn't have
that was
really
gonna
a war
be
in
able to do
the
that.
80s.
And honestly, him just sort of being a rejected, like, new kid, like, it works. That's enough by itself, honestly.
Absolutely. Because then if you pull more into it, because then you've got Mike losing his parents, you've got Bev and her father, who is...
Yeah.
It's way more amped in this. And it's...
But you said it was like that in the book, though, right? Like,
Oh, yeah. And I read an article, and they brought a very good point that... Stephen King does it very well, where it's, sure, we've got the scary things like the hotel, the haunted hotel, or, undead children or undead pets or a scary clown, but the real monsters in all of his books and all of his material are the humans.
Right.
Like, the supernatural things may amp up that thing, but it's the abuse of parents. He has a couple books where there's one where it's an abusive husband that is It's crazy.
He did the book that Secret Window is based on, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and that one is completely just a dude, like
It's just a
losing
guy.
his mind. Great film, by the way. I was talking about this after watching it the other day. I have to go back and watch that.
That
It's
one's
a
really
phenomenal movie.
But the article played on the fact that yes, you have the scary clown and you have Pennywise and you have It, who is scary because it's playing on all of those fears, but at the same time, all of these adults are playing on these fears that aren't necessarily something like a clown or a zombie or a mummy or a werewolf. It's things like the creepy guy who delves out your medicine and creeps on Beth.
That was brutal to watch.
And you've got him, you've got Bev's dad, who very obviously has raped her in the past and is very protective of her sexuality and is just, And then you've got, I'm blanking on the bully's name, but you've got his dad, who's a cop, who literally shoots at his son's feet.
Yep.
To show that he's such a chicken shit, but that just perpetuates the cycle of abuse.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, clearly his dad is just an asshole unto himself. And no, that's the sad thing, is that he is a victim sort of as much as anybody else, except that his victimization has gone to the point where he is now victimizing others, which is the cycle of victimization.
Exactly.
Like, that is how that works eventually.
And it's a big reason why he's susceptible to Pennywise, because even though he's a teenager and arguably you could say he's more of an adult, the fact that he's gone through that makes him more susceptible to this power.
I love the show, by the way.
Yeah.
And the fact that they didn't just do it for his scene to have him do that. It constantly was in the background. Anytime there was a TV on, basically, like, that kid's show was in the background.
Yep.
Just, it was like just one other feeler, basically, that Pennywise just sort of always had out there to try to attract somebody else. Like, never necessarily focusing in on it until that moment, until he was like, I need someone to kill these kids because they are becoming a problem.
Exactly. But it shows just kind of his impact. Well, you see it when Ben is about to get carved open on that bridge, and these adults drive by and they just watch it happen, and then the balloon pops up in the back. It's not Pennywise making them blind. It is Pennywise making them blind to it, but at the same time, it's just you watch the hold that it has over all of the adults.
Well, and actually, if you think about it, like, anytime the balloon shows up, it's always covering something, you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like the balloon almost actually kind of symbolizes like while he's doing a spell that is like affecting the kids, like, to make them see their worst nightmares and everything, so that he can get them nice and juicy for when he wants to feed upon them.
Exactly.
He at the same time is casting sort of some kind of magic or psychological trickery so that nobody else is noticing, and the balloon almost seems to kind of be that, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of time, or if the kids are the ones who are seeing it, it's blocking Pennywise until it is removed, either by popping or he removes them from sight. It's always a kind of blocking type of, like, don't notice this kind of thing.
Exactly. So yeah, just it's very interesting to watch, because when you read the book, you get more of a delve. The miniseries doesn't really show it until the miniseries doesn't show the effect Pennywise has on the outside of the Losers Club until really when they're in the library as adults and Tim Curry's hanging off of, like, banisters and shit, and he pops a balloon that pops blood in some woman's face. Like, you don't get to see it a whole lot until this one.
And this one also builds up the idea that he may have not been able to affect adults the same way.
Yeah.
And that's, like, maybe like they're going to come up with the fact that that's a new trick that he learned while he was hibernating this time, because this time he almost dies hibernating. Because clearly, like, he clearly had a chance to feed. Like, he feeds in. We know that there's going to be a second one. We know how the story goes. He fed enough that he is not going to die. But he clearly was worried about it when he, like, fades away. Like, he basically, like, kind of, like, sort of let a lot of his body rot off for, like, just the chance that he might actually be able to come out the other side on that.
Exactly.
And so yeah, with that, it was nice to see, though, like what he can do to adults, at least right now, or if they'll bring up the fact that it was just that he's not interested in adults because kids are more frightened.
Yes. The fear is more pure.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. It's easier to get fear out of a kid than it is an adult.
Right.
Theoretically, anyway.
But yeah,
at least dresses, a clown.
Yeah.
Or what have you.
But yeah, no, the direction of this film, the acting, and the like you were saying, the camera angles even are everything comes together really perfectly, down to the point where to kind of like pay homage to the fact that it's a recreation of an 80s kind of feeling sort of thing. There is an 80s montage of them cleaning blood. That was like the greatest thing ever. And I feel like a lot of people in the generation younger than ours might not totally get that. I was talking to my brother about this because there were some people who like kind of almost ruined the last half of the movie for us because they would not just stop laughing through like the whole fucking thing. At least we got a lot of like, because the really good scary stuff is at the beginning because you get more adjusted to it as time goes on, and so it didn't bother me like. It was all right ultimately, but my brother did sort of point at, because it kind of started after the 80s montage when they started sort of giggling and stuff like that, and my brother pointed out, is like, kids younger than us might not really remember the 80s montage, probably don't really know what that is, which is unfortunate because it was so beautifully executed. It was the grossest thing you could do an 80s montage about too, like blood all over the bathroom, symbolizing period blood of all things, like like that is just the creepiest thing to do something like so innocent with, like, but they nailed it to a T. All right, so let's go for the big thing, the Pennywise v Pennywise. Now, what I like about the new guy is that he's got more voices that he can kind of do than Tim Curry does.
Yes.
And the fact that he was actually the one doing the wandering eye trick. Yeah. Because that was incredible. Because that was one of the great things about that first Georgie scene too, is that like when Georgie said he's gonna go, hi, just kind of starts fucking.
You watch the facade kind of flicker,
and it's. But you need your butt.
Yeah. You watch the facade that it is holding kind of fade a little. Like, oh, wait, so obviously this kid's not going to totally follow me. All right, I got to amp this up a little bit.
And the other big thing is that I think sort of for the direction of this film, which is very different from Curry, which this is one of the things that makes it super hard to kind of like play favorite or anything on. The facade in this movie was never good. It was always this sort of broken facade that was pretty easy to see through, and that was what was really distinct. Curry had to do this thing because the facade from the direction was there, like he was actually supposed to seem like, so he had to balance being totally terrifying and totally still seeming like he could just be a clown.
Curry was a clown that I would approach.
Right.
This Pennywise? Absolutely not.
No, you from like a block away, you'd be like, I'm fucking out of here. No, but Curry was, like you'd approach him, and then after like a couple minutes, you'd be like, something's desperately wrong here.
Exactly.
Like,
he was more of like a deranged serial killer kind of vibe. Like, you're a clown, but you're a clown that escaped from the psychiatric clinic like up the road, didn't you? Like, kind of thing. Whereas this was very much, you got your like hackles raised of like, you're like immediately, you're not what you pretend to be. Even as adults, that's what we see, and kids are, but even the kids kind of notice too.
Oh yeah, Georgie's kind of off, like he's off put a lot at first, and then he he has to sort of be won over. But then like as soon as he's won over, like he's sort of off put by like the next thing that he says. Like he's like he'll like go like, oh but I'm a clown, it's okay, give me your soul. But I'm a clown. It's like it was that kind of thing to it, where like like the kid only ever got so comfortable with it, and that was like it was a whole. It's a little bit hard to compare them. Like it's hard to say whether or not you're talking about the performance or the direction, because both were so drastically different and played off of the performances played off of what the direction was that they were being given. And in that first one, the direction was lure them into a false sense of security, and then become scary.
Yes.
And then like build them up so that you can break them down so that they'll be even more scared once you actually do scare them.
Exactly.
There was none of that in this one. The whole goal right from the beginning was be fucking terrifying. Be terrifying and try desperately to not be terrifying, but be unable to not be terrifying.
Well, and you can probably, a lot of it, and I've never read like articles that support this, but just as from like a personal theory, you can kind of chalk it up to the fact that they push it to the 80s as opposed to the 50s and 60s. Because from like our parents' generation, you pick up hitchhikers, you hitchhike yourself. You talk to strangers. You have no problem, like, if your neighbor who you don't know down the street wants to, your kids hang out down the street with the neighbor. There's no issue with that, and nobody talks about anything that happens after that. The 80s kind of started from, we barely grew up in the 80s. I was born in 89.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not, we grew up in the 90s, but it's close enough. Well, and this is like 88.
Yeah, so this is in our zone. And we watched enough 80s films as kids that we kind of understood what was going on.
But, Stranger Danger was a thing when we were kids.
Oh, fuck yeah. No, and it was in the mid-80s as well. Like, that's when it kind of started.
So, the fact that Georgie knows Stranger Danger, we know this. And even if his parents don't give a shit, like whether, supernatural influences or not, it's almost like you can watch Pennywise struggle with the knowledge that this is a new generation.
Right, like I can't just be a clown and they'll come up to me and then I can take them by the hand off to wherever I want to.
Exactly. Kids know better nowadays. Kids have... Now, in the 80s, they didn't have cell phones, but, so it'll be interesting to see how Pennywise functions in the office.
I can't wait for Chapter 2. No, that is actually a thing that I am looking forward to because he will be coming out of cell phone screens and he will be in your computer and flat screen
TVs and all this other stuff.
It's going to be amazing. No, we're going to now watch Stephen King's Monster play in the technological age and holy fuck.
I don't talk to my neighbors. Like, a neighborhood is a neighborhood, yeah, but unless your neighbors are that friendly, you don't do that. You don't let your kids wander off down the street to the park and just be like, oh, I'll be home when the street lamps turn on. That's not a thing anymore. So whether or not that's intentional, I feel like that might be part of it too, is that Georgie's a kid who, he went off and played by himself, but we can almost say that's a parental thing, where he knows better, but he's realizing that he knows better as he's talking to Pennywise.
Right, like, as he's there, I'm like, I'm not so sure. And the lady's disposition towards seeing him in the street is completely different in this one than it was in the miniseries.
Absolutely.
Like, she just is like, kid. And the miniseries, I think she, waves at him in the miniseries. No, so I think you actually might be right. I think they were probably going for something, because there was definitely a very intentional switch on how that lady was played. Yeah. So, they may have very much had that in mind. And maybe that is it. He knows he can't, really lure in anybody into that good a sense of security.
Exactly.
But he just needed the first kid. He was super hungry, so he wasn't going to go on a big hunt. And the kid was there, and it's like, okay, I have to just try. If I can just get him, close enough. If I can just get him to reach for the boat, that's all I need.
That's all I need.
And you can, and it does. It's the thing. It's hard to say. I will say that I don't think this guy... He was never really attempting to, so it's hard to say if he could or not, but he certainly never did that duality of, seeming fun and jovial and terrifying at the same time, the way that Curry did.
Because Curry had his moments where he was terrifying and jovial at the same time, like when he's waving from Bill in the graves, as Bill's entering Derry and as an adult. He's got those moments where he's funny, but it's like, oh, you're, fucked up funny. Skarsgård's like that all the time. When he waves to Mike with the severed arm that he's gnawing on. Yep. That scene was funny, but it's so scary, too, because you're like, oh, fuck, that's Georgie's arm.
Yep.
It's so... His funny moments are still fucked up.
Yeah.
And it's so fucked up that it's funny. It's kind of like that circle that goes on. So it's very hard to compare the two because of the way that the
direction's so different, and they took the cues on what they were doing with their choices based on that direction. So it's really hard to say.
Well, and even when they're okay, so I don't know if they did this with Curry. I did watch an interview with Curry. It happened a couple weeks ago before the new movie came out. He had talked about his first scene with the kid who played Georgie, and Georgie wouldn't stop giggling because Tim Curry is a funny clown and he's sitting there and haha, it's really funny, but Georgie, listen, kid, you gotta stop laughing because we need to film the scene. He wouldn't stop laughing. Whereas with Skarsgård, the Losers Club didn't see Skarsgård until his very first scene with them.
Right.
And I don't remember which scene it is, but in order to scare the shit out of these kids. And the kids were like, oh, it's not gonna be scary, blah, blah, blah. No, these kids were scared to death. When he first shows up and they first filmed with him, they kept, kind of like with a lot of comedic actors, I know Ryan Reynolds did it when he was in, what horror movie did he do? Maybe it was Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something like that.
I mean, just in general, they're doing that a lot more with these days with the
Jim Carrey did it too, where they separate themselves from the kids.
Right. No, that all goes back to the way that Gene Wilder did the first Willy Wonka.
Right.
And no, a lot of horror movies these days are taking the cue off of that because like everyone found as the internet becomes provides more and more of these little details and everything, filmmakers have kind of noted like, wait, that's why those kids seem so weirded out like in Willy Wonka. Yeah. I could do that. I could just like not have the. I mean, we saw it also with Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight.
Right.
Like until you were in a scene with him, you didn't see him in his full makeup and like in performance, which is what caused a Shakespearean actor with an Academy Award to forget that he had a line as he entered because he had never seen him, and then there was just a genuine shock that it was not going to get past.
Exactly, and then they used that shot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's very hard to compare the two. It's also very hard to compare and see, here's the thing: is like when I first watched the miniseries, it was in 1990, so I was only a year old, so obviously I didn't watch it when it aired originally. But I was probably like 5 or 6, and because what 5 or 6-year-old doesn't watch
horror movies while their parents are in the other room.
Yeah, exactly. No, my parents were in the room. My mother had me watch Pet Sematary when I was like 8.
That's fucked.
I could never get through Exorcist, and I think it's because she could never get through Exorcist. Because she was the generation.
Never really bothered me, weirdly enough.
I can't get through Exorcist. And my mom was the generation that saw Exorcist in the theaters, and she was slept on the living room couch for 6 weeks because it scared her so bad.
Yeah, that's such a. I don't know. I mean, again.
But like the hysteria of Exorcist being in the theaters, like
people
had
were
like
flipped out on that movie. No, that was almost as bad as Psycho I get.
Yeah.
Holy
Psycho
crap.
I get too. But the feeling I got watching the new one was the feeling I got when I was a kid watching the 1990. Because in 1995, it wasn't hokey. Like watching it now, the 1970s clothing and the effects and the rubber spider and it takes you out of it enough that it's not scary. But as a 6-year-old, it's still
freaking
scary.
terrifying. No, and you're right. They upped the ante. They were actually able to get because the effects were better, and they had better actors all around. Like whether or not Tim Curry or I can't remember what's the new guy's name?
Bill Skarsgård.
Bill Skarsgård. Whether or not which one's a better actor, they're both.
It's
phenomenal.
very difficult.
They're both really good actors. But Curry was probably the only like really solid actor in the original one. Like everyone else was okay. They weren't bad necessarily.
John Ritter though. John Ritter was probably it was John Ritter. Oh my God, who played older Bev? Somebody else too that was like good in that point.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, I don't think it was either of their best performances. Though.
No,
you know what
and
I
even
mean?
like Seth Green, like not best performance ever. Like they were all again the kid actor thing.
Yeah.
It was very much that time and place where kid actors were just kind of like, this is what we got.
Look, we're just gonna throw our kid on screen because fuck it.
Exactly.
No, where is this one? They really, really went out of the way to find kids who could act, and they got top quality actors for the adults.
Absolutely.
And overall, it's a solid flick. I think it does more justice to the original story.
Absolutely.
And
the original history.
I think just the fact that they've now updated the time sequence and everything is like because this was really them kind of paying homage to that original miniseries while saying like, but here's how you actually kind of do it better. And now with Chapter 2, there's so much licensing to be had because the technology is just... Because, let's face it, there was a pretty big technological boom, like, in the 70s into, like, the 80s for those people. Like, everyone thought that was a very impressive boom.
Right.
But they didn't know what was coming in the mid-90s. Like,
Exactly.
They didn't understand what was about to happen to the world from the mid-90s on to a point now where we're still just kind of freaked out about how fast technology really advances these days.
Well, and if you think about it, like, the adult scenes in the miniseries, I think one of them has a big ass cell phone, and there's one computer in the library. Like, think about even in small town Derry, where the technology may not have evolved as quickly as somewhere else. It's still gonna be something that, we're gonna see Pennywise show up on cell phones. I can guarantee you, someone's gonna turn on their cell phone, and he's gonna be seen dancing through like the iPhoto menu screen or something, like through their own pictures.
Yep.
Or Facebook. or something like that.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, it gives them the opportunity. I feel like the second chapter might wind up taking a lot of liberties with the story.
Probably.
Because I think it's going to need to, because I think...
yeah. It's outdated.
Realistically, what it is that, like, when you go to, like, the adult 70s, like, in the original story and everything, so much of our modern-day technology could have circumvented so many of the situations that took place at that point in time, especially cell phones and stuff like that. Yeah. So not only do you have to write around that, if you're really going to do it justice, you have to actually write it so that what should have been an advantage to them somehow becomes a disadvantage to them. You know what I mean? Like
the cell phones where, okay, you get separated in the sewers. Not a big deal. I got a cell phone. Yeah, but that's how Pennywise jumps from each of you.
Yep. They're going to have to invent something like that where, like, the technology is not only not helpful, it's detrimental to them.
Exactly.
So that you can kind of go back to that, like, okay, now it is just us versus the monster again.
Exactly.
And I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with his true form in the second film, because
they didn't touch really on the deadlights, and they really didn't touch on, like, the true forms or anything, which they didn't in the miniseries until later on anyway. Well, they touched on the deadlights a little bit in the beginning, with the kids. But there wasn't as much. And I think there was I will say one of the few things I didn't like about the movie was the damsel in distress Bev thing, because that's not in the book.
Oh, yeah, that was weird and unnecessary.
So, I think it was hard because it felt kind of like a cop-out to get everyone back together, but I felt like it was almost necessary to get all the kids back together in a quick enough time.
Right, no, because I can't remember how it actually happens.
I don't remember how it happens
the real story, because they actually do that more correctly in the miniseries.
Yeah.
But it's super weird, and it takes forever. Like, the
does.
the miniseries is 6 hours long, and a lot of it is actually dialogue between people trying to convince each other to actually go do the thing.
So, I understand why they did it. I'm kind of bummed that that's why they did it that way, and they picked her instead of somebody else.
That's the thing, you could have picked one of the other kids. You could have picked Ben. Ben actually would have been a great choice.
Ben would have been a great choice, but at the same time, Bev's the one that's not scared of it.
So
to pick her makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But and honestly, if that's your one complaint, like,
and that's really it. That was like my one complaint.
No, and I frankly agree. I'm super excited to see the next It. I'm
excited to see who they cast for it.
I am too. Like, it's gonna be a like, they'll have to do some really good stuff to make sure. And I think the look is, because they're gonna be tempted to go off of the look, but I think, like, kids change a lot once you like from childhood to adulthood. So what's really, I think, going to be important is capturing the feel and the essence, and finding an adult actor who kind of still feels like that kid.
Right. Like that adult who just doesn't shut the... Like, he's one of the... Like, with Richie, it's going to be one of those guys who just doesn't shut the fuck up. And still doesn't learn to shut the fuck up. So, yeah, I think it's going to be... We don't get it till 2019.
Which is sad, but it gives them time to work on it and do it right. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for this next season of Stranger Things.
Yes.
We have to get going now. We're well past our hour point. But I think we're gonna try to do another episode sometime this month, because we gypped you out last month. So we'll at least get one more, and we'll probably just do some kind of nostalgia Halloween movie thing sometime later in this month. But until then, if you haven't seen it, go check it out.
Go see it in theaters.
Go see it in theaters, for sure. No,
Absolutely.
This is definitely a theatrical experience that you're going to want to have. And if you have not seen Stranger Things yet, catch up before the first season.
Absolutely.
It's so worth it. Anyway, you all have yourselves a great evening.
Bye, guys.
Bye!
The music for the Geek for All show has been provided by Fat Street Beats, Ben Sound, and Purple Planet. Please support their individual pages.